When you think of a constitution, you probably picture a pretty lean, straightforward document. Well, India's is not that. It's this sprawling, ambitious, and really complex blueprint for the world's largest democracy. Some have called it a masterpiece, others a mess. So, what is it that makes it so unique? Let's dive in. Okay, first off, just get a load of the size. When it was first adopted back in 1949, it was already the longest constitution in the world. And today, it's got around 470 articles. To put that in perspective, the US Constitution has just 7. So yeah, this isn't just a rule book, it's practically an entire encyclopedia of how to run a country. And right away, that massive size sparked a huge debate. Critics were quick to dismiss it as just a bag of borrowings, basically saying there was nothing original in it. But its main architect, Dr. B.R. Ambedkar, he had this brilliant comeback. He said, "You bet we borrowed." He said the framers had proudly ransacked the world's best ideas to build something that would actually work for India. And that tension between borrowing and adapting, that's really the key to understanding the whole thing. So, here's our plan. We're going to explore its incredible balancing acts, we'll look at the rights and duties it lays out for its citizens, and then, at the end, we're going to tackle that big question. Is it a masterpiece or a contested compromise? All right, first up, the Great Balancing Act. Because at its very heart, the Indian Constitution is just a masterclass in making total opposites work together. So think about this. How do you build a constitution that's stable and lasting, but not totally stuck in the past? Well, India's answer was to create this amazing blend of rigidity and flexibility. The really core foundational principles, they are incredibly hard to change. You need huge majorities in parliament and agreement from the states. But a lot of the other stuff can be amended much more easily, which lets the document evolve with the times. It's designed to be both an anchor and a sail. Pretty clever, right? And here's another one of those fascinating balances, the whole structure of power. On one hand, India is clearly a federal system, with power divided between the national government and the state governments. But if you look a little closer, you see this strong tilt towards the center. A single constitution for everyone, a single citizenship. It's what you'd call a federal system, but with a very powerful, unifying core. For this next bit, the framers did another really slick synthesis. They took the idea of parliamentary sovereignty from the British, where parliament is basically the supreme power, and they mixed it with judicial supremacy from the US, where the Supreme Court gets the final say. So what's the result? You get a system where parliament can change the constitution, but the Supreme Court can step in and say, nope, you can't touch the basic structure of it. It's a built-in check and balance. Okay, so that's the structure of the state. But what about the people? This brings us to what I like to call the citizens' charter. Their rights, and just as importantly, their duties. At the absolute heart of this charter are the fundamental rights. These are the core protections that are guaranteed to every single citizen. But here's the crucial part. They are justiciable. Now, that's a fancy legal term, but all it means is that if one of your rights is violated, you can actually take the government to court to enforce it. It's the ultimate shield for the citizen against the state. But the Constitution also has something else, something Dr. Ambedkar called a novel feature, the directive principles. The best way to think about these is like the state's conscience. They're a set of social and economic goals, basically a roadmap for creating a fair and just society. Now, unlike the fundamental rights, you can't sue the government for not doing them, but they act as a moral obligation, and they're the yardstick we can all use to measure how well our government is performing. And finally, to complete the picture, you have the fundamental duties. These were added in 1976, and they're basically a reminder that with great rights come great responsibilities. It frames citizenship as a two-way street, balancing all those individual freedoms with our duties to the nation and to each other. But, for all of its brilliant balancing acts and noble goals, the Constitution has always been what you might call a contested masterpiece. So let's dive into some of the sharpest criticisms it's faced over the years. And the critiques are pretty wide-ranging. Some say it's really just a copy-paste job, mostly from the old colonial-era Government of India Act of 1935. Others go even further, arguing it's fundamentally un-Indian, that it ignores the country's own ancient political traditions. And of course, people always bring up its gigantic size and its incredibly dense, legalistic language. This quote from a member of the assembly that actually drafted the Constitution, wow, it's just so evocative. It perfectly captures that feeling some had that the final document was, well, alien. that its spirit was Western, not Indian, that it was the music of an English band and not the familiar sound of a sitar. And then there's that critique about its complexity. Sir Ivor Jennings, a very famous British expert, he argued that its dense legal language made it almost impossible for the average person to understand. He's the one who famously called it a paradise of the lawyers, which is a nice way of saying it was written for experts, not for the very people it was supposed to govern. But Dr. M. Baker, he had a really powerful defense against all this. He basically said, look, the fundamental ideas of a constitution, liberty, equality, justice, you can't put a patent on those. They're universal. The real genius, he insisted, wasn't in inventing brand new ideas out of thin air, but in skillfully adapting those universal ideas to solve the unique, incredibly complex problems that India was facing. So, at the end of the day, we're left with this huge question. Is the Indian constitution just a borrowed patchwork, a collection of different parts that don't quite fit together? Or is it a brilliant and practical synthesis, something uniquely crafted to hold together one of the most diverse nations on Earth? That's the debate that continues to define it, even today.